Welcome to today's episode, where we're diving into one of the most fascinating and controversial documents ever declassified by the CIA. I'm talking about the Adam and Eve story by Chan Thomas, a book that was partially classified for decades and contains some truly mind-bending claims about Earth's history and our future. Now, you might be wondering, why would the CIA classify a book about ancient cataclysms? That's exactly the question that makes this so intriguing. This isn't just some fringe theory published in someone's basement. This was deemed important enough to be restricted by one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world. Today, we're going to break down the core concepts of this document, examine the outrageous claims it makes, and most importantly, explore why some of these ideas might actually have merit. So buckle up, because we're about to question everything you thought you knew about Earth's history. Let's start with the central claim of the book: catastrophic pole shifts. According to Chan Thomas, Earth doesn't just gradually shift its magnetic poles over millions of years. No, he claims that the entire crust of the planet can suddenly slip over the molten interior, causing the poles to relocate in a matter of hours or days. Think about that for a moment. The ground beneath your feet, the continents, the oceans, all sliding around the planet's molten core like the skin of an orange rotating around its flesh. It sounds absolutely insane, right? But here's where it gets interesting. Thomas wasn't just making this up. He based his theory on the structure of Earth itself. The planet has distinct layers: a solid inner core, a liquid outer core, a viscous mantle, and a relatively thin crust. That crust is only about 30 miles thick under continents and as little as 3 miles thick under oceans. It's literally floating on a sea of molten rock. Now, could this actually happen? Well, the concept isn't entirely without scientific precedent. It's related to what geologists call true polar wander, where the entire planet can reorient itself relative to its spin axis. This is accepted science, though it's supposed to happen very slowly over millions of years, not catastrophically. So what does Thomas claim will happen during one of these catastrophic shifts? This is where the book gets truly apocalyptic. He describes a scenario that reads like the worst disaster movie you've ever seen, except he's claiming it's happened before and will happen again. Picture this: massive earthquakes, not just in one location, but simultaneously across the entire planet. The ground doesn't just shake, it ripples like water. Buildings, cities, entire civilizations all reduced to rubble in minutes. But the earthquakes are just the beginning. As the crust shifts, the oceans don't move with it immediately. They keep going in their original direction due to inertia. This creates tsunamis that make anything we've seen in recorded history look like ripples in a bathtub. We're talking walls of water miles high, sweeping across continents, drowning everything in their path. And then there's the wind. As the atmosphere tries to keep up with the suddenly rotating crust, hurricane-force winds, potentially reaching hundreds of miles per hour, scour the surface of the planet. Nothing remains standing. Forests are flattened, soil is stripped away, and anything not anchored to bedrock is simply erased. Thomas doesn't just describe this in general terms. He gets specific about what would happen to different parts of the world. California, he claims, would be completely destroyed. The entire West Coast would be hit by earthquakes so powerful that the land itself would be torn apart. Cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco would simply cease to exist. But it's not just America. Europe would face similar devastation. Asia would be reshaped. Africa's geography would be fundamentally altered. South America would be battered by tsunamis from both the Atlantic and Pacific. No continent would be spared. The aftermath would be even more terrifying. With most of humanity wiped out, survivors would face a world completely transformed. Former tropical regions might find themselves at the poles, covered in ice. Arctic areas could become temperate zones. The entire climate system would be reset. And here's the really unsettling part. Thomas claims this has happened before. Multiple times. He suggests that this is the real explanation for mass extinctions, for the sudden disappearance of advanced civilizations, for the flood myths that appear in cultures around the world. Let's talk about those flood myths, because this is where Thomas's theory starts to gain some traction. Every ancient civilization has stories of catastrophic floods. The biblical flood, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Hindu texts, Native American legends, Aboriginal Australian stories. They all describe the same thing, a world-destroying deluge. Now, mainstream science explains these as memories of local floods, or perhaps the flooding that occurred at the end of the last ice age when sea levels rose. But Thomas asks, what if they're all describing the same event? What if these aren't myths at all, but historical records passed down through oral tradition? He points to geological evidence that early scientists struggled to explain. Georges Cuvier, one of the founders of paleontology, noted that the fossil record shows sudden, catastrophic changes. Species that dominated for millions of years suddenly disappear, replaced by entirely new ones. The transitions aren't gradual, they're abrupt. Then, there's the evidence of rapid climate change in the geological record. Mammoths found frozen in Siberia with undigested food still in their stomachs, suggesting they were flash frozen. Tropical plant fossils found in Antarctica. Marine fossils on mountaintops. These are real phenomena that scientists have documented, and they're hard to explain with slow, gradual processes. Now, I want to be clear. Mainstream geology does not support the idea of catastrophic pole shifts happening in days or hours. The scientific consensus is that major geological changes happen over millions of years, not overnight. But that consensus has been challenged before and been wrong. For most of the 20th century, the idea of continental drift was considered fringe science. Alfred Wegener was ridiculed for suggesting that continents moved. Now we know he was right. We just call it plate tectonics. The point is, scientific consensus can change when new evidence emerges. Thomas cites researchers like Professor Frank Hibben, who documented evidence of universal catastrophic death in the fossil record. Hibben described finding layers of broken and twisted animal remains mixed with shattered trees, all jumbled together as if by some unimaginable force. This isn't the pattern you'd expect from slow, gradual extinction. There's also the problem of explaining rapid species turnover. How do you get from dinosaurs dominating the planet to mammals taking over in what appears to be a geological instant? The asteroid impact theory helps explain the dinosaurs' demise, but it doesn't explain all the other mass extinctions in Earth's history. Let's dig deeper into Thomas's explanation of how this could happen. He focuses on Earth's magnetic field and the planet's internal structure. The magnetic field isn't static, it fluctuates, and has even reversed polarity many times in Earth's history. We know this from studying magnetic minerals in rocks. Thomas suggests that the buildup of ice at the poles creates an imbalance. The ice caps are massive, weighing trillions of tons. If they're not perfectly balanced, they create a wobble, a stress on the system. Combine this with changes in the magnetic field, solar activity, or other cosmic triggers, and you might have the conditions for a sudden shift. He also talks about the molten layers beneath the crust. The outer core is liquid iron and nickel, constantly moving and generating Earth's magnetic field. The mantle above it is viscous but can flow over geological time. The crust floats on top of all this. It's not as stable as we like to think. What if there are natural triggers we don't fully understand? Periodic cycles driven by solar activity, galactic positioning, or internal Earth dynamics. Thomas suggests that these cataclysms might be predictable if we understood the cycles. And that's perhaps why the CIA found this document interesting enough to classify. So, why might these outrageous claims actually be true, or at least partially true? Let's break it down rationally. First, we know catastrophic events have shaped Earth's history. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, massive volcanic eruptions, ice ages. The planet's history is punctuated by disasters. The question isn't whether catastrophes happen, but what causes them and how quickly they occur. Second, the geological and fossil evidence does show patterns that are hard to explain with purely gradual processes. Rapid climate shifts, sudden species extinctions, and dramatic geographical changes are all documented in the scientific record. Maybe the mechanism Thomas proposes is wrong, but the evidence of catastrophic change is real. Third, the universality of flood myths across unconnected cultures is genuinely puzzling. While it's possible they all independently invented similar stories, it's also possible they're all remembering the same real event passed down through generations. Fourth, we're constantly discovering that Earth's systems are more dynamic and interconnected than we thought. The magnetic field does weird things. The climate can shift faster than models predict. Ice sheets can collapse more quickly than expected. Maybe the crust is less stable than we assume. And finally, there's the CIA classification itself. Why would they classify this? Maybe it was just Cold War paranoia, or maybe someone in the intelligence community thought there was something worth investigating. The fact that it was eventually declassified suggests it wasn't considered a critical secret, but the initial classification raises questions. Now, do I think a catastrophic pole shift is going to happen tomorrow? No. The scientific evidence for that specific mechanism happening on human timescales just isn't there. But do I think we should be humble about what we don't know about Earth's history and potential future? Absolutely. The Adam and Eve story reminds us that our planet has a violent past and that the stability we experience is, in geological terms, a brief moment. Whether or not Thomas's specific theory is correct, the broader message is worth considering. Earth is more dynamic and dangerous than our everyday experience suggests. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into one of the most controversial declassified documents out there. Whether you think it's brilliant insight or complete nonsense, it certainly makes you think. And sometimes, that's the most valuable thing a theory can do.